Hey, wonderful, wonderful, lovely people. A pleasant evening to you. So, beautiful people, I was watching the news somewhat. And I saw something that, I said to myself, I'm wondering if the relevant party or, institution have thought it through. So I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact captioning, but it tantamounts to the churches or the church, maybe a specific denomination, I'm not sure, calling for married couples to have more babies or to have children. Let me pause a bit because I think sometimes, unfortunately, and I say this respectfully, with all respect to people, that we hold our heads sometimes in the bins, and I'm talking, let's say the clothes bins, the apparel bins. We hold our head in those bins far too long, and we're not seeing the bigger picture. We're not seeing the mitigating and the contributing circumstances as to why a lot of these married couples are not having children. I would want to believe when you get married, yes, you want that kind of a communal, romantic, sexual, sensual experience with each party, the husband with the wife with the husband. We understand that. But there is also another layer to that. You build together and the wonderful things, but the other layer is to produce, to create. God through you create another being so that they're an extension of you. They can carry on your name, carry on your legacy. You have that ability to pass down, things that you would have learned, wealth, health, all manner of good things to that being, to that child, in time to come. So my belief is that once you get married, generally speaking, by and large, I'm not saying 100%, I'm saying generally, my belief is that you'd want to have children, especially if you're a young couple. You would want to have children. That is one of the factors that is commensurate with you being married. So the point that I'm making is it's very redundant, really, to even ask them to do that. Because it was obviously the church is not going to say people, married or not, because they're going to be following the auspices of the Bible in terms of getting married and having your children and whatnot, even though it doesn't explicitly say it in that way. It is inferred, so you won't see a scripture that says get married first and then have children. You follow? So it is inferred according to what the Christian fraternity or has posited. You have to consider in a lot of these cases, or some of these cases, let's use the word some, that you may have either party or both parties may be seldom that are unable to have children for whatever medical issue, whatever reason. Maybe rarely you have cases where they said, both parties may say, I'm not interested in having children, whether they're young, middle-aged or so. Definitely if you're older, you may not find that happening. Because people, the possibility or the fear of you having children that are, I don't want to use the word defective or challenge, but there can be some complications which affect the full health and wellness of the child. Because they're probably going to say eggs are old and, so it can complicate. And the child is born handicapped, autistic, challenged in some way or other. And it may not necessarily be so. It may not necessarily be so with technology and, a new quantum of things and how things have metamorphosized and transformed and improved. You have to be very careful how you push that out to the fore to married couples. That comes with the territory of them being married. It comes with the territory of them being married. They do want to have children. Again, I'm speaking in general. I'm not speaking about 100% of married couples. They do want to have children. So if you're seeing that they're not having children, you have to look at the circumstances that are contributing to it. Sometimes it's a physical ability to not have. Oftentimes when they're married, it's usually on that basis. Maybe in some sense it could be financial. Maybe they're in a bad state. But even then, that is probably seasonal, that is temporary, short term. You know, they say, all right, let us get out of this situation first before we bring in other human beings into this sort of difficulty that may put a stranglehold on them. So it could be financial, but oftentimes when they're married, children are on the forefront. Children are on the forefront. So when they don't, usually it could be a physical issue. Again, it could be a financial issue. It could be a case where both parties already have children and they probably say, boy, because it's so costly to have children and the stress, and you know, children, they probably carry a lot of different things that takes the energy. It takes energy to really deal with that. They say, all right, you have children, I have children, you know, let us just, you know, pool our children together. You know, have that kind of a joint custody and that lovely symbiotic relationship going on. So I don't need to have any. And I'm sure there are other situations, other reasons, what I call three main ones. And you have to take into consideration the physical, or the health condition. In many instances, either party, or perhaps maybe seldom, both parties are unable to have it because of a physical reason. I know of cases like that. And they end up adopting, you know. So it is something that, you know, you have to be very careful, because sometimes something sounds very spirited and very energetic and it has a lot of zeal in it, but I don't think we dissect the issues and the problems carefully. It is almost like when I hear them talking about, oh, the research has shown that the matrifocal homes that are headed by women, the single parent homes, you find that the children end up in prison. You find that the children become criminals, and you come with all of that. That may be true, but that is an unrealistic data in my view. Listen to why I say that. The reality is that it's like having a bird that is trying to fly in full capacity on one wing. In that household, you really need backative, because a female cannot be a male. She cannot exemplify what God has imparted in men to embody and to emit. So if you find that they are imprisoned and that they become criminals, can you imagine if there was no one to parent them? So the fathers have left their duty. In most cases, it's not the woman running them in most cases. They have. Because I've heard men talk about on a podcast saying where men have said, if I've left the woman, I've left the child, whether it's my child, yes or no. And a lot of you men know that. A lot of us have been abandoned by our fathers, and they were not hidden by the mother, or, you know, prevented to see the child because of the mother. They chose not to. I know of many, many, many people in that situation. All right. So can you imagine if they did not have the mother to cushion the blow of not having one of the parent, at least having one wing to fly on? Can you imagine the bird having none and can't move up off the ground? So that means most of those guys either would be dead, or they would annihilate most people in the country. They would have gotten rid of most people. That's how treacherous they would have been. At least the mother is there to kind of cushion the blow and teach them something worthwhile and teach them something fundamental. So it has nothing to say that she's a main focus as to why they become criminals. It is other extenuating circumstances. No father in the home. She's struggling financially. She's struggling emotionally. She's struggling physically. And having to fly like a bird with two wings. She's pushed to do that task, that unfair task. So the point that I'm making is that when we come out with some things that sound good, they may not be sound. They may not be solid. It just sounds good. It's like when you're eating, you know, ice cream, and then at the end of it, you're asking, I wonder if the 21 nutritional value are in the ice cream. You're asking a ridiculous question. You should have do your checks before to see all the different, if there is any nutritional value in the ice cream. All right? So think wisely. Anyway, guys, you know what to do with TikTok and YouTube. Subscribe, Give me one of those lines and you can follow me on Instagram. Have a good one.